Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel, and welcome to the number one player in the 50 most relevant. Yep, for 50 days in a row, you've been hearing my voice. I am so sorry, my friends, for that. But we've been talking through who I think are the most relevant players across SuperCoach, DreamTeam, and AFL Fantasy for your 2021 season. Number one, Jake Lloyd. Do you have him in your side? Oh, I'm nervous for you if you don't. We'll talk about that and some of what he's been doing over the past few years. For this final episode of the 50 Most Relevant, I don't just have one guest on. I've got two fellow panelists. Yes, it needs a triple effect to talk about Jake Lloyd. I got Kane on. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hello, MJ. You've made it. You're going to sleep so well tonight, I bet. You've done it. Another year of the 50 in the bag.
I will see my wife and kids now, which is fantastic. And I got last year's Dream Team winner. I've got Rids on. Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
Oh, good. We're at number one. We are here. We've made it. Let's talk about Jake Lloyd. Before we do it, a massive thank you to all our Patreon supporters who have helped us through this preseason so far. And a massive thanks to a couple of brand new Patreons. Adam and Furcan have just joined in the past few days. Thank you for your incredible support. They've joined at that premium tier level. You can join that too at coachespanel.tv. All right. He, my friends, Jake Lloyd, is one of the best players in fantasy footy we've seen in a real long time. Just the 27 years old, this defender. He had his best score last year in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team as a 120 unadjusted against the Port Adelaide Football Club, while in SuperCoach, it's a 157 against the Hawks. You go, oh, I felt like he was better than that. He was. He pretty much scored that every single freaking week. From a career perspective, his best ever score came just a couple of years back against the Fremantle Dockers. In AFL Fantasy, it was 163, while in SuperCoach in 2018, it was a 173 against Fremantle. In AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, he's priced at an average of 91.4 or adjusted up if you want to multiply it by 1.25, which AFL Fantasy have done. That would mean he's priced at his highest ever point based on that average of 114.25, while in SuperCoach, a career year for him, 122. Not bad. He's priced just over $650,000 in SuperCoach, $873,000 in AFL Fantasy, and just about $5,000 shy of Dream Team. And Reds, we talk about players often on these podcasts that not just take seasons away from you, but can give you incredible moments of satisfaction as a fantasy footy coach. And while he might not have been the top scoring player overall last year, there were not many that could compete with the ability and the performances of Jake Lloyd last year.
Sorry, mate, I must have got the wrong email. I thought you said it was Daniel Lloyd.
No, sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. I did all my research for Daniel Lloyd. Thinking, geez, that's a surprise.
I was told Lloyd Meek, Rich.
Every chance. Oh, what a surprise. Jake Lloyd. Who would have thought it was Jake Lloyd? Yeah, he could take a season away from you very quickly, can't he?
He really, truly can. Kane, last year, he ranked first in the league per game for effective disposals, first for kicks, fourth for rebound 50s, fifth for meters gained, 11th for intercepts per game. We'll talk about his fantasy breakdown in a moment, but those are just the scoring components and the scoring categories of what he can do, so that even if for whatever reason there's a quiet patch of 10, 15 minutes in a game where you're like, oh, this one's dominating the ball through the mids and the forwards, it's not down back too much. Just that way he builds his scoring, he's always just moments away from stacking on 10, 20, 30 points in a matter of minutes.
He's a hungry player, MJ. I'll tell you that. He's a hungry player. He loves the ball. He loves getting the ball in his hands, whether it's a kick out, a handball receive. He's that burst scorer. Again, if you've watched him as an owner, you know, you're watching him going, geez, is this going to be that quiet game? And then 2 minutes later, he's added on 30 points. And I think conversely, people that are waiting for that slow game to get on and going, yes, Lloyd's at 40 halfway through the third quarter. And what always happens? He always seems to get to the ton, and 16 straight SuperCoach tons. to end the season. You think about that when we had a large break after round one. He came back from that and was just insane, like just week on week. And even in SuperCoach, started taking that ceiling, which is obviously what you need when you're going to average 120 plus. But just his big games and the consistency of 130 plus, that was the thing we haven't seen from Lloyd. You know, he's usually that guy that hovers around the low 100 with a game here or there.
Yeah.
But again, he became a genuine captaincy option, which only hurt coaches didn't have him that little bit more.
It's crazy. You talk about that round one against the Adelaide Crows, pre-COVID Briar, 55 in Dream Team and Fantasy, 77 in SuperCoach. That's his seasonal lows across all the formats. Gets back from that COVID break. And like you said, Kane, in SuperCoach, 16 tons in a row. 9 of them were over 120. 4 of them over 140. No other player scored that many consecutive tons on the run home in SuperCoach. He was the clear number one defender for averages and for points. And like clearly, like the second place guy was Luke Ryan. He was 253 points ahead of him. Third place was Rory Laird. He's almost 300 points ahead of him. He ranked 4th across the entire league for total points. He was one of only 6 players to score over 2,000 points, and he ranked 5th for averages overall. Only Max Gawn, who we spoke about yesterday with Jimmy, Lockie Neal, Jack Steele, and Clayton Oliver in SuperCoach averaged higher. At Ridge, we'll talk about Dream Team in a second, but this is not just elite defender scoring. This is not just captaincy scoring option. This is among the best fantasy players in the game last year from that SuperCoach scoring format.
So crazily, to find someone that you're really confident to take him on with, look at his price. He's 656,000 in SuperCoach. So you got to spend an extra 100,000 to go to a max score.
Yeah.
And I mean, pretty much he's in the ballpark, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But otherwise, you've got someone like a Brody Grundy. So you think, oh, well, Grundy might be the guy. He's the same price as Lloyd, so you're not even saving any dollars. Like, so I know people are always encouraging, you know, I'm going to take him on, I'm going to take him on, I'm going to take him on. But the reality is, this guy is just a jet.
It's scary, and I'm going to get both of your take in a little bit of time as we get towards the end of the episode, and I ask the question: you can take him on. Should you take him on? That is maybe a better question we'll ask. From a Dream Team and AFL fantasy perspective last year, an average of 91.4, adjusted average up in that format up to 114, 6 pure tons. Remember, shortened quarters, an additional 8 scores, between 80 and 99. 80 was the 100 of 2020 in these scoring formats. And just 3 times all last season did he not reach that 80 marker. The clear defender for averages and for points in that format too. He was 87 points ahead of Lockie Whitfield, who was second. And then there's a massive gap into third, another 196 points ahead of Rory Laird. And again, both these players played the same amount of games. Ranked 4th for overall total points in Dream Team and Fantasy last year. He scored more than Brody Grundy. He scored more than Jack Steele, more than Zach Merritt, and more than Jackson McRae, and was ranked inside the top 7. Yet we're not going to count Luke Dunstan's 100. He was ranked inside the top 7 players in those formats, Kane, for averages as well. We're getting a genuine, not a midfielder playing in defense like we might be getting with Rory Laird this year. We're getting a genuine defender who, for not just 2020, but for 2019, has shown he's durable. He's got a high scoring floor. He's now this year shown he's got a ceiling. There's just not much to not like about Jake Lloyd.
Yeah, I wanted to flag him, Joe. When you're reading out those total point numbers in DT, don't forget, you got to do the 1.25 to that as well, because he's putting, 100 points on them in a shortened game, 250 points on them, on like the third place guy. Like, you start doing the math on that, like it just showcases the real void that he had between the next tier of defenders. You mentioned the durability, missed 1 game in 5 seasons.
Since 2016, yeah.
Like, we know how important that is. The fact that he's improved his average every year since he's come into the competition is insane in DT. There's only 1 year in SuperCoach where he's actually regressed. He regressed from a 112 to a 109.
Oh, no.
Which is just disastrous. That would have derailed everyone's season if you picked him at the start. Like, you can't fault him in my mind on the stats, because durability is near on perfect. The floor is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
The ceiling's now rivaling midfielders.
Mm.
And there's no way he can fall out of the top 6 backs, probably even the top 2 or 3, really. If Whitfield and Laird had their best ever seasons,
Sure.
they got the roles they need, maybe they can challenge. But if that's the case, then all 3 of them collectively are 15 to 20 points ahead of 6th place. So I think the only real way you can challenge a guy like this is by being a contrarian for almost contrarian's sake, hoping that if everyone's going with Lloyd,
Yeah.
maybe I can set myself apart. Maybe you're having to rely on an injury, which for this guy, you're going to be lucky to get one within 100 games. And if it is, he's going to miss 1 game. So I think you have to love someone else. Rids mentioned a few guys in SuperCoach that, maybe could challenge him.
Sure.
You're not going to be getting much value, really. You're probably going to have to be paying something comparable to get a comparable score because that's just what he does.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting point. Normally on these episodes, and Kane, you've spent a lot of time with me over the past month and a half talking about this, Rids yourself as well, behind the scenes, doing a power of work, helping me on this 50 most relevant. Generally, when we get to this point in time in the episodes, we start going, okay, cool. Let's just not gush over this player that's popped for a number of years. Let's genuinely critically analyze where you can build a case for not going with him. Because right now, in terms of ownership percentage in SuperCoach, 49% of coaches own him in that format. In Dream Team, 37% of coaches own him in that format. And in AFL Fantasy, it's the lowest of them all. 28% of coaches own him in those formats. So he's not the most owned player, but he's up there in that line. Generally, Rids, when we look at reasons for not picking a guy, we might start to look at some comparable players in other lines or even in the same line. But is there a way to build a case for you not to start Lloyd outside of, as Kane just alluded to, of the I'm going to take him on and hope and not have data behind it, not have reasoning behind it, but hope is really the reason? Is there a way we can build a case to go against Lloyd this year?
Okay, so SuperCoach, I can't make any case. So I'm not even going to go to SuperCoach. Dream Team, however, and I suppose AFL Fantasy to a point, if I was looking at starting Proust as my R2 this year, now let's just roughly look at figures, okay? I'm going, well, now that Proust is out, for 5 months. We know that now. The news came out.
Yeah, shoulder reconstruction. Yeah, he's done.
It happens. We know, okay, and it's highly likely he's probably going to be a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
Now, let's just go. Who is comparable in price in defensive line? Let's say a Miller, okay?
Sure.
Now, if I need to go someone like that, maybe I go Gorn or Grundy, as a set and forget ruck setup, remove Proust and include Miller in the back line. So you're looking at, say, a Grundy and Miller combination, but it's got to be done in combination.
Yes.
So I can do that across multiple lines, okay? I just thought Proust was the best one to call out there because he had a high ownership. So
yeah.
people are going to be looking to make those changes. The reality of that is, though, if you don't start Lloyd, how are you going to get him in? So, I'm only just picking at it a little bit, okay?
Sure.
Now, AFL Fantasy, there's going to be people out there, and I'm 100% guarantee you, when this goes on Facebook and Twitter and everyone else, everyone's going to say, oh, there's no upside, there's no value, da-da-da-da-da. So AFL Fantasy, people are just going to go with their own approaches anyway.
Sure.
So there is an option there, but again, how are you going to bring him in? At some point in time,
yeah,
Jake Lloyd needs to be in your team this year.
Yeah.
So I find it hard, mate. I really do.
It's sorry, man.
No, I was just going to end and say, I just think sometimes we get a little bit too cute across the formats, especially in the limited trades with SuperCoach and Dream Team. And sometimes we look at trying to pick someone up in the case of 50,000, 100,000 if they drop in value. Don't lose sight that if your overall focus or your league focus, it's irrelevant. What you're looking for is points. If you're not picking Jake Lloyd to make 200,000 to bring someone else in and cash them in, you're not picking Jake Lloyd because you want to maximise your points for the whole season.
Correct.
So I just find it very hard to argue against it.
That's fair enough. Kane, let's look through his fixture then. Again, let's see if there's a place there. I'll walk you through each game for the first, let's go 8 weeks. He's a part of the dreaded round 14 bye. But again, if you believe he's as good as we think he's going to be, he's one of the first pick that's coming off that bunch of teams anyway. Let me walk you through, and I'm keen to get your kind of initial reflection on each team. Round 1, Brisbane Lions. How do you think that plays out for it?
You wouldn't think Sydney would win, but the other thing I wanted to add, MJ, as well, on this guy is he barely has a win-loss differential scoring-wise. Like, it's the same thing. So, again, you'd think Brisbane win, one of the most inaccurate teams in the league, so there's probably going to be a few kickouts for old Jake, and to be honest, I think they're past the point of tagging a guy like Jake Lloyd with a forward tag. So I'm pretty comfortable that that's a decent score there.
Yeah, no, okay. Well, that's fair enough. And again, the expansion of the 15-meter rule from 10-meter rule just further opens up the ability to take on and play on from kick out. So there's no one that's come into that team that I believe is a superior player and distributor over Lloyd. So I think that's going to hold. Next team they come up against, the Adelaide Crows. How does that go?
He had his worst score against them last year. So if you want to read into recent form against them, you'd maybe be a little bit hesitant. But I think that was the first game of a whole new scoring and also a whole new game. We had shortened quarters, and it's pretty clear that when he came back, he adjusted pretty well. So round 1 can be a bit weird. I think we've all had situations where we've moved off a player after round 1 or 2 because we thought we saw something that maybe wasn't there or didn't last. So again, I'm not overly scared of his chances of scoring well against the Crows.
In the third round, you don't need to do anything about this, Kane. I got this one covered. Round 3, they take on the Premiers, Richmond, and they will happily just let defenders rack up points and switch from end to end. They don't care if you want to possess the ball in their attacking half. Fine. Richmond have been the easiest team to score against for defenders, probably since their breakthrough premiership of 2017. And so I don't even need to ask you about that one. I know that's fine. Round 4, Essendon.
Is it okay if we read? Is it okay if MJ, if we read between the lines and say you're not really worried about the fixture? Can you give me a game in this first 8 that you're maybe concerned about?
Oh, maybe.
Because the way you're setting it up, it sounds like he's got a pretty good run.
Maybe round 7 against Geelong at the SCG.
Why is that?
Maybe. Well, I think it's only if Geelong play that same deny the opposition of the ball and heavy possession footy. Now, again, that didn't work for them on the grander stage. They made some big adjustments to that side with Higgins, with Smith, and also Jeremy Cameron. So there might be an evolution of that game style through there. But for me, that's the only team in the first 8 weeks I'm concerned about. He's got a really nice early fixture with an inaccurate Brisbane, a developing Adelaide, and a premiership team that will just let you overpossess the ball in their forward half. And so I don't see, as best as we can forecast, I don't see a scoring regression. I don't see anyone that's come into that side that's going to deny him of the ball. None of those teams really play a forward tag on any of their defensive targets and options. If anything, it's probably Rampy. You'd probably try to stop him from intercepting rather than Lloyd setting up. So I don't know. And again, at his price point, I don't know. I just can't build a case to not pick him in every format. I got nothing.
Reeds, you got to have something, Reeds, something off the shelf.
No, I was actually going to throw in with the naming of the teams the day before games as well through the rounds. You need guys who are absolutely durable. Now, if you're looking for the value options, okay, in the defensive lines, now I'll just do it as defensive lines. I know I always encourage people to look across the whole team and everything else, but let's just look at defensive lines. Lloyd is as durable as they come. If you want to go to the value options, okay, there's a reason why Williams is value because he's had a bit of a injury history. There's a reason why guys like Miller are so cheap because they have had an injury history.
Yeah.
If you go through them all, Doherty was sore last year. Jeremy Howe was injured last year. I mean, outside of Laird and Lloyd, Laird's even missed games, from year to year. Whitfield's injured. Sicily's out. It just doesn't stop. I just don't understand why you wouldn't be looking at a Jake Lloyd right now and going, look, there's an easy. Last year he got 2,000 points in SuperCoach, a little bit less so in the other formats. There's an easy way to bank 2,000 points for my season over the 17 rounds. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more with 22 rounds this year, but who knows with COVID?
Yeah.
The reality is, just don't get too cute with this. And I'm the guy who encourages people to think outside the box and everything. Here I am going, guys, I just think this is a no-brainer. Just lock it in and just work out your other cute areas.
I think that's it, isn't it? Is we want the best players in every line to play for as long as possible. And barring injury, I don't see a world where Lloyd regresses so far that the investment of making him in your team now costs you. And so, yes, he might not pop at a 122. He might go at a 118 in defense. That's still clear and above the top defender, unless Laird or Whitfield have incredible seasons. Even if he drops back to a 108 defender like he was just 12 months ago in Dream Team and Fantasy, who's going to choose to go against him for a long period of time? Like Rid said, I just go, with your starting squad, I want to build around the best available players. There's no injury concern. There's no role concern. There's nothing other than I want to be unique for the sake of it is a reason to go against him. That's why for me, when I came down to creating this list of the 50 most relevant, to say someone's a must-have is dangerous because it means you cannot succeed without that person. But I think in 2021, barring injury, it's going to be really difficult for you to succeed from an overall rankings perspective to have Lloyd not in your side for the vast majority of the year. So for me, he's a lock in all my sides, in all the formats to start. And it sounds like for you boys, he's the same too. So that's why he's the number one most relevant player. But where does he go in drafts? Yesterday on the episode, Jimmy made the claim, which some would have thought, well, then why is it number one on the most relevant? Well, because it's probably more salary cap relevant than it is what we go for. But he said Max Scorn for him was the number one pick in all formats of draft. Where's Jake Lloyd ranked for you boys? Kane, maybe we'll go with you first, man. On draft day, what pick are you going to go after Jake Lloyd?
He's probably 3 in DT and maybe 4 in SuperCoach. But at the same time, he's got the ability to go up to 2, I would say. With Grundy, if something came out about a different little ruck share or something along those lines, he could get that bump. I'm taking him. Only guy that maybe can jump him out of Grundy and Gawn is Neil in SuperCoach. I don't have any midfielder even close to him in DT. As I said, we always give about 10 points grace to a defender or a forward, and this guy's going right with the best mids without even taking that into account. Perfect durability. If he goes past 3 in a DT draft, I'm a little bit surprised. If he goes past 4, I'm surprised. Again, some people will take Neil, which is fair enough, but if it's past 4, I'm totally shocked.
What about you, Rids? Are you in a pretty similar vein of where Kane's at?
Yeah, I think this year's just a really interesting year for drafts, isn't it? We discussed it a little bit earlier on. I just think there's 2 or 3 rucks that are so far ahead of everywhere else that they pretty much make up like the first 5 picks. And then you've probably got Lloyd in the mix and, potentially whether it's a dream team one, you might have side bottom. If it's a SuperCoach, O'Neill. Yeah. But he's in the top 5. That's just a no-brainer, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think if you've got a pick in the back half of the opening round, Lloyd's not going to be a player you're going to own in 2021. Really, really simple. He is, in my eyes, the most relevant player across your salary cap formats of the game. If you want to read the article, it is online for you now at coachespanel.tv. All the links to go back and read every single player. You can find that there. All the podcast episodes of every single one of the players we have done. You can go back and check them out. We have been so incredibly humbled by the great support of people across the fantasy footy community. We have had people, not just from the coaches panel, we have heard Kane every second day. It feels like he's been on with me, or Rids, or Jimmy, or Tim, just to name a couple and band members of the coaches panel. But we've also been really, really lucky that great support from people from across the fantasy community have jumped on board and helped us out. Louis, of course, a fellow panelist. You've been hearing and getting to know him. Statesman of the Draft Doctors, Stevie Fizz of the Draft Doctors. Great to have both those boys on. The Phantom has been in. We've had, who else? Lek Dog from Jock Reynolds has been involved. Rain Man, I think I've already mentioned him. McGrath has jumped on board from the DT Shiva. Jimmy, our fellow panelist. Hef from the Keeper League pod. And I'm sure I've probably forgotten others, but we are just so incredibly grateful for a really incredible fantasy footy community that has been on the journey with us through the 50 most relevant. And Kane and Terids, I appreciate your support behind the scenes, jumping on these podcasts and talking with me through these players over the past 50 days.
Well done, MJ. You've made it for another year. Should be very proud.
Well, we all just love chatting fantasy footy, don't we? That's why we do this. The good news is there's still plenty of podcasts coming from the coaches panel. It's not just going to be me with one or two of the members. We're assembling the panel, Justice League style. Now, the weekly, maybe multiple weekly podcast episodes are coming where we don't just talk about a specific player. Strategy conversations, now they start to really deep dive in. Now we start to get some greater wisdom from the panel. We'll open up to some draft conversations and a bunch of other stuff that is going to be landing for you via wherever you get this podcast episodes. That's where you can get them to at coachespanel.tv. There'll be articles dropping from me and an absolute bucket load of members from the coaches panel. They'll be dropping. In fact, tomorrow, I'll tell you one that's already dropping. 10 players that were unlucky to miss the 50 most relevant. There, I'm telling you who are some 10 players. There's probably about 45, but there were 10 players that were unlucky to miss the 50. Who are they? I'll tell you about them on coachespanel.tv.
Hey, MJ?
Yes.
Is Dan Lloyd in that?
No, and neither's Lloyd Meek. It's like the Simpsons episode. It's the no homers club, but we're allowed to have one. We can have one Lloyd in the 50 most relevant, and I've chosen Jake. Sorry, mate.
Well done.
Thank you, everybody. Hey, thanks for being on the journey with us. Thank you to my fellow panelists. Thank you to ultimately for you, for listening, for streaming, for downloading, for supporting. We love doing fantasy footy conversations with you, and there are plenty more to come ahead of round one.